I have recently been spending time in the Old Testament book of Proverbs. One thing that struck me is the number of character types who keep recurring in the pages of Proverbs. I want to introduce us today to one of them, the sluggard, as most English versions of the Bible call him or her. We are introduced to the sluggard in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 to 11. Let me read those verses now. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. And poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. We'll come back to those verses in a moment. Sluggard is not a word which we use very much today, is it? Perhaps we would use a word like slothful, which always seems to me a bit unfair on that slow-moving tree-dwelling creature who has no choice in the way it acts. But that is very different from people, whom Proverbs calls sluggards. As we shall see, they do have a choice. On one level, the sluggard in the book of Proverbs can come over as an amusing cartoon-like character. And I believe that this is quite deliberate. I can't resist a smile when I read Proverbs 19:24. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish and will not even bring it back to his mouth. What a deliberately exaggerated word picture this is, as it makes fun of the laziness of the sluggard. So yes, on one level such verses are amusing, but on another level, everything that the book of Proverbs has to say about the sluggard is deadly serious. Proverbs keeps putting us in mind of Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount about the two ways. Matthew 7:13 and 14. There's the easy way that leads to destruction, and there's the hard way that leads to life. Destruction and life. Those are the two alternative destinations that the Bible keeps on placing in front of us. And we keep hearing the Bible's exhortation, choose life. When the book of Proverbs talks about the sluggard, this is not simply a character flaw. We all have different temperaments. Some people naturally, temperamentally, have a tendency always to be doing things, others less so. That is not what the Bible is talking about. Nor is the Bible commending the quality of being a workaholic. In fact, I would want to say that it most definitely doesn't. When the book of Proverbs talks about the sluggard, this is a moral issue, even a spiritual issue. It has to do with the fundamental choice that each of us has to go God's way or to go our way. Of course, salvation is by grace alone, and we are not saved by being the opposite of the sluggard. But the evidence or the fruit that we should expect to see in someone who is a Christian believer is that they will avoid the temptation to be a sluggard. And the opposite of being a sluggard is being diligent about living as a Christian, not leaving undone what needs to be done, taking the opportunities that God gives us, being mindful of our accountability to the Lord as our master. So let's go back for a moment to those verses in Proverbs 6 to 11. There are two things here. First, there's the lesson to be learnt from the ant. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Go, get moving, consider, use your mind, be wise, which is the keynote of the whole book of Proverbs. And you may recall that the beginning of this book tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and of wisdom. The ant in view is apparently the common Palestinian harvester ant, which stores its grain within its nest. Not having any chief, officer or ruler is not an argument against government, but it's telling us that the ant has a God-given wisdom to work and to do so in an orderly way. It makes the most of the limited period of the harvest, only 2 months, to gather its food for the whole year. Make hay while the sun shines is a way we might sum up this aspect of wisdom held up to us as an example. Make the most of opportunities. Second thing in these verses is a warning not to be spiritually lazy. One modern translation of verse 9 puts it this way: But you, lazy bones, how long will you sleep? When will you wake up? Verse 10 gives us the sluggard's response. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. That's what this individual wants. And one commentator makes this remark about the sluggard's response here. He does not commit himself to a refusal, but deceives himself by the smallness of his surrenders. So by inches and minutes, his opportunity slips away. But, and this is verse 11, this is the path to condemnation in the eternal perspective. Poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. As I said earlier, we must understand all this in terms of a spiritual laziness to be avoided. And in order to reinforce that, I want to close this thought for today by encouraging us to turn to the words of the Lord Jesus in his parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30. Do you remember the 3 servants to whom the master in that parable entrusts amounts of money to use wisely during his absence? When the master returns, representing the second coming of the Lord Jesus, the servants are called to give an account. The 3rd servant in that story, who hides his money in the ground, is the sluggard. The master calls him a wicked and slothful servant, and it is the sluggard of the book of Proverbs who should come to mind here. In contrast to the first 2 servants who have carried out their tasks faithfully, this man is condemned. He is not a true believer, but his Christianity is a mere pretense. The message of today's thought is a serious one, but it may also be an encouragement to us to make the most of every opportunity the Lord gives us, and to do so willingly and thankfully.